we can talk about these. How many of you guys know what this is? I'm sure you do because I've seen them out there. So this is a martingale. And the original purpose of a martingale was, what do you guys think? You got some guesses? There are several different types of breast collars, right? But this is called a martingale. It's not necessarily a breast collar, but it could be passed off as breast collar. It would be in that same category. Or a pulling collar. You see some pulling collars. Pulling collars is sort of came from more like a draft type working horse. And then it kind of crossed over into the cowboy world when people were roping and pulling stuff really hard. A pulling collar would be used for a person who's got a saddle that doesn't fit very well. Because you put pressure on the saddle horn, the saddle slides back. The pulling collar keeps the saddle from sliding back too far. So the martingale, is there any other guesses what this was originally used for? No?
Keep their head down.
So that's a running martingale. That's a different deal. They keep their head down?
Yeah.
A running martingale has a piece of leather that goes to the center strap on the girth, or the center D-ring on the girth, with two rings that you would run split reins through and use as leverage to keep the horse's head jacked down. That's a different deal. They call that a running martingale. So back in the day, there was a saddle company called the Visalia Stock Saddle Company. Have you guys ever heard of them? Yeah. So it's a California, like a traditional vaquero West Coast saddle company that had been doing it for years and years and years and years. And back in those days, they rode what's called a centerfire saddle, or a single rig saddle. So instead of, like on this saddle is a double rig saddle. Most of you guys ride double rig saddles, right? You guys all have back cinches. So that would be a double rig saddle. So you have your front cinch up at whatever position, and there's all kinds of different positions on the front cinch, or where this front D-ring lands. And then you have your back cinch. Well, back in the days of the Visalia Stock Saddle Company, they had a centerfire saddle. It only had one cinch, and it was right in the center of the saddle bar. So it went, instead of being more toward the front, behind the horse's elbow, it was back further, and there was no back cinch. And what this was originally used for was to keep that center fire cinch from doing what? It was originally used to keep that cinch from sliding back and becoming a rodeo, right? And originally, these martingales only had a strap that went over the horse's neck. They never had a strap that went back to the saddle. The reason why we have straps that go back to the saddle now is because when the horse puts its head down, it can slide over their head. So if your horse took a drink of water or reached down to scratch his face, on his foot, or whatever, if you don't catch it in time, it'll slide over their head. But that's what these were originally made for. That's why these straps are so thin, because they're not really made to pull. They're at this point, because most saddles now are really nice and they fit really well, they're basically just a traditional piece of gear that look really good. They do have some properties that kind of help your saddle from rocking a little bit, but for the most part, it's just really cool looking.
Why were those saddles made with the cinch position in the middle as opposed to where they are now?
That's a good question. I think that where we're at now is the evolution. What they figured out was it wasn't working because there was a lot of maintenance. You had to constantly check your cinch. The horses were built way differently back then. They actually rode them hard. They were probably in different shape. They were a different breed. They were taller, all kinds of different things. So this, I think, is just your evolution of that. Like these saddles here, and you can see them if you go out to look at them now. This front cinch, where this D-ring is, where the front cinch lands, is going to be in different positions in relation to the fork. And I don't remember what this is, a 7/8 position probably. But that's the most popular for this type of saddle, which is a weight saddle. What else do we want to talk about?
Does it matter the positioning of the D-rings for attachment of the collar? Like on your saddle, like mine are real low.
Yeah, so
Should they be higher or?
for this type of martingale, yeah, they should be higher if you can get them higher. If you had a saddle that was higher, how these are up here a little higher. Down here, it will still work. It's not like you're using it to pull on anything. You're just basically using these straps to keep it from coming over the horse's head. So it's kind of a semantics thing. It's not that big of a deal.
Most anybody that works on saddles can take where the strings are coming out,
Mhm.
little rosettes
Yeah,
there,
right here.
and they can put your D-ring in there.
Put a D-ring right here.
Do that ring touching right there. Most anybody can do that that works on saddles.
How tight do you, how do you determine how tight each component should be?
On this, it really shouldn't be tight. It should just sort of fit, kind of like your hat fits your head. You don't want it up too high to where when the horse does reach down, it cuts into their neck. Some horses, depending on how big and thick their necks are, you just can't get around it. But you're not trying to confine the horse in any way with this.